Thousands of Canadian soldiers went to war in Europe and came back with wives. Known as the war brides, they came to our country at the end of World War II, most for the first time ever, and have become a strong part of our wartime history. Melynda Jarratt has written extensively about Canadian war brides. She joins me now from Fredericton. Melynda, thanks for being here.
No problem, thank you.
So I know through your research you've talked to many of the war brides in this province, not to mention across Canada as well. Tell me a little bit about what Remembrance Day means for these women. I mean, I guess it's a look back on quite a life-changing time.
Well, you know, it's been 65 years now, since almost 65 years since the end of the Second World War, or more than, and Canadian war brides are getting up there in age, and so are their children, and every year, Remembrance Day, we're reminded about the sacrifices that their husbands made, but often in the shadows were the sacrifices that their wives made, because the women lived in the shadow of their husband's military service. And willingly so did not try to hog the limelight and wanted to honor their husbands. But as the men have started to pass away in great numbers, and what you have are growing numbers of widowed war brides and their children and grandchildren who want to not only honor their dear departed grandfather or father, but are seeing the value and the honor in remembering the sacrifices of their grandmothers and mothers who came here to this country in 1946 as war brides.
I guess talking to them offers another perspective on wartime too, I suppose. Some of their stories do seem very romantic as well.
Oh, the story of the war brides of World War II is probably the most romantic of any of the stories that have been told. And they're compelling human dramas that tell a story of, passion and tragedy and war and love, and it's all mixed up in the whirlwind of romance, and you just can't help but be completely drawn into their world. It was a different time when we didn't have the kind of communication systems we have today, and there was no internet, when there was no telephones in everybody's home, and when you made that decision to come to Canada on a boat that took 6 and 7 days to get here, you didn't turn around and go back the next day by, take your airplane out to Fredericton or Moncton or St. John and get back the same day. This was a lifelong commitment, and also a commitment that was because of the value system of the time, the shared values they had, traditional families, and the role expectations of women as mothers and wives. So there was a lot that tied up in that whole war bride story that is kind of a romantic vision of the past that we really don't have today anymore.
But life, I suppose, must have been very challenging too. Do you have a story you could tell me about a New Brunswick war bride and some of the challenges she might have faced?
Oh, I have hundreds of stories about New Brunswick war brides. Well, there were 1,800 war brides who came to this province with their 900 children. So you can just imagine they're coming to a very rural province with a very small population of less than 500,000 at that time, and many of them are ending up in farms. Over 1,000 of them ended up in farms. And, there's just so many funny stories. I know one lady, Mrs. Zoe Boone, for example, who ended up in Rowena, which is at the edge of the Tobic Indian Reserve. And Rowena had a population of 100 at that time, around 12 houses at the end of the reserve. And there was no telephone, there was no water, sewer. So her husband, who had been a prisoner of war, had taught her that if she needed any help, that what she was to do was to string out a red flag along the clothesline and hang it out on the clothesline, and then someone would come, to her rescue. Well, straight out of some kind of military manual. And telling me later about it, we laughed and laughed because we never really thought of it, but that's what it was. And just being cornered by angry roosters in an outhouse. One lady getting stuck in the middle of a stream, being chased into the stream by a very a belligerent cow that was not going to let her leave that stream, and she was freezing. She's standing up to her ankles or knees in the stream, and she'd gone to get some water. By the way, had gone to the stream to get the water. Just funny things that happened to the ladies, but so there's a lot of tragedy too, and there's a lot of sadness, and what really I think is even more tragic is that even today here 65 years after the end of the Second World War, and we're still dealing with the fallout of that through the problems caused by citizenship issues facing war bride children whose citizenship is being challenged by the Canadian government to this day. They're known as the lost Canadian war bride children, and I know of many war bride children who are having trouble getting the citizenship. They've lived here all their lives. They're brought here as children, like Senator Romeo Dallaire, the well-known Senator Romeo Dallaire, who also, when he was in his early 20s, was told he wasn't a Canadian citizen. These are people who are finding out today at age 65 when they apply for their old age pension. Or maybe they're applying for a renewed passport, and where they fill out the passport, it says, where were you born? And when they say England or Scotland or Holland, suddenly that sets off a whole series of very unhappy circumstances that causes them to be told they're not citizens.
Well, I'm sure it's a whole other story, Melynda, and I'd love to talk more about it, but we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us with that perspective today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, we are going to